Rain hammered the streets of Chicago just after midnight. Neon reflections trembled across cracked sidewalks beside the old federal courthouse. Daniel Mercer sat alone inside his rusted sedan, watching the courthouse entrance through fogged windows. 3 years earlier, Daniel had worn a judge's robe inside that same building. Now he delivered frozen food for cash and slept inside his car near Lake Michigan. The city forgot fallen men quickly. Daniel rubbed his aching hands together beside a dying heat event. The winter air crept through broken door seals. Every breath smelled like coffee, old leather, and regret. A black SUV stopped outside the courthouse steps. 2 men exited wearing expensive wool coats despite the freezing rain. Daniel recognized one immediately. Senator Richard Holloway, Illinois political royalty. Untouchable for decades, the second man carried a silver briefcase chained to his wrist. Nervous eyes, military posture. Former intelligence, Daniel guessed instantly. Years in courtrooms sharpened instincts ordinary people ignored. Daniel reached for his camera automatically. Old habits survived even after careers died painfully. He snapped several photographs through the rain-streaked windshield while the men disappeared into the courthouse basement entrance. Nobody used that entrance anymore. Daniel frowned slowly. Federal archives occupied the lower floors after midnight renovations began last month. Classified property disputes, military contracts, missing evidence from corruption cases. Too many coincidences lived underground lately. A homeless veteran pushed a shopping cart past Daniel's car. The old man suddenly stopped beside the courthouse fence and stared downward toward the basement entrance. Then he whispered something through trembling lips. "They're moving the witnesses tonight." Daniel stepped outside immediately, despite the freezing rain. "What witnesses?" he asked. But the veteran backed away fearfully into the darkness, beneath the elevated train tracks. A moment later, courthouse lights suddenly shut off, and somewhere below the street, someone screamed. Daniel ran toward the courthouse fence while icy rain soaked his jacket completely. The homeless veteran vanished beneath the train platform before Daniel reached the sidewalk corner. Another scream echoed faintly below ground level, shorter this time, muffled suddenly, like someone covered a mouth violently. Daniel's pulse quickened with dangerous familiarity. Courtroom instincts returned instantly after years buried beneath failure and bitterness. Something illegal was happening inside that building tonight. He approached the locked basement entrance carefully. The heavy steel door stood slightly open despite security protocols. Yellow light leaked across wet concrete steps, descending underground. Daniel hesitated only briefly. 3 years ago, exposing political corruption destroyed his marriage, career, and reputation permanently. Powerful men survived. Honest men disappeared quietly afterward. Still, he stepped downward. The basement corridor smelled like bleach, electrical wiring, and cigarette smoke. Voices echoed ahead behind reinforced archive doors. Daniel moved silently past stacks of government storage boxes stamped with military inventory codes. Then he heard Senator Holloway clearly. "The witness signs tonight or he disappears forever." Daniel froze beside a darkened records room. Another voice answered nervously, younger, southern accent. "Sir, the Justice Department already suspects missing testimony from the Phoenix Defense Contracts investigation." Holloway laughed softly. "Suspicion dies quickly when evidence burns." Daniel carefully lifted his camera again. Through the narrow doorway window, he saw 4 men surrounding a terrified older accountant seated beneath fluorescent lights. The accountant's face looked bruised badly. A legal document rested before him beside the silver briefcase Daniel noticed earlier upstairs. Military procurement files covered the surrounding table. Then Daniel recognized another face inside the room. Federal Judge Harold Bennett. The same judge who publicly discredited Daniel during the scandal that ruined his life. Cold anger tightened Daniel's chest painfully. Bennett leaned toward the accountant impatiently. "Sign the statement confirming Mercer fabricated evidence years ago," he demanded, "or your family loses federal protection immediately." Daniel's breathing stopped completely. Fabricated evidence. They were still covering their tracks after all these years. Suddenly, Daniel's shoe scraped lightly across loose concrete. Every head inside the room turned instantly toward the doorway. Silence swallowed the basement. Then Senator Holloway slowly smiled. "Well," he said calmly, "the ghost finally came back." Daniel stepped backward instinctively, while the men inside the archive room rose simultaneously. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting nervous shadows across concrete walls stained with decades of water damage. Senator Holloway remained seated calmly at the table. Confidence radiated from him like expensive cologne. Men protected by power rarely feared consequences anymore. Judge Bennett reacted differently, his face drained pale beneath the harsh basement lighting. "You said Mercer disappeared," Bennett snapped toward the security contractor beside him. The contractor reached beneath his coat slowly. Daniel noticed the movement instantly. Gun. Years handling criminal trials sharpened survival instincts ordinary citizens never developed. Daniel lunged sideways just as the contractor drew a suppressed pistol from shoulder holster leather. The first shot exploded quietly against metal shelving. Boxes crashed across the corridor. Daniel sprinted through the basement blindly while more suppressed shots cracked behind him. Dust and paper filled the stale underground air. Government files scattered beneath his boots. "Alive!" Holloway shouted sharply behind him. "I want him alive!" Daniel turned hard around a storage corner and slammed through an emergency stairwell door. Rusted steps groaned beneath his weight as he climbed upward toward street level. Footsteps thundered behind him. Fast, professional. Daniel burst onto the courthouse's second floor through a maintenance exit. Empty hallways stretched ahead beneath dim security lighting. Rain hammered enormous courtroom windows overlooking downtown Chicago. His chest burned violently from exhaustion. 3 years living rough destroyed stamina once sharpened inside elite legal circles. A bullet shattered glass near his shoulder. Daniel dove behind a marble column beside Courtroom 12. The contractor emerged calmly from the stairwell below. Mid-40s, military haircut, controlled breathing, former special operations, Daniel guessed immediately. "You should have stayed buried, Judge Mercer," the man said coldly. Daniel recognized him suddenly. Elias Kane, former Navy intelligence contractor linked secretly to defense procurement investigations years earlier. Congress buried his name repeatedly beneath classified hearings. Daniel's pulse pounded harder. The corruption network reached far beyond Chicago politics. Kane advanced slowly with the pistol raised steadily. Then another sound interrupted everything. Police sirens. Outside. Close. Kane stopped instantly beside shattered courtroom glass. Holloway's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Leave now. Witness relocation failed. Clean the situation later." Kane lowered the weapon reluctantly before staring directly into Daniel's eyes. "This city already erased you once," he said quietly. "Next time, nobody will remember your name." Then he disappeared back into the stairwell. Daniel remained frozen behind the marble pillar while police lights flashed red and blue through rain-covered courthouse windows. But deep downstairs, the terrified accountant was still screaming. Chicago police flooded the courthouse entrance within minutes. Officers pushed reporters behind barricades while detectives rushed through rain toward the basement archives. Flashing lights painted the old stone building in violent shades of blue and red. Daniel slipped quietly through a side hallway before anyone recognized him. Experience taught him dangerous truths. Corrupt systems protected themselves first, especially when powerful politicians controlled judges, police commissioners, and federal contracts worth billions. He exited through the courthouse parking structure into freezing night air. His soaked clothes clung painfully against exhausted skin while downtown traffic hissed across rain-slick streets. Daniel reached his car, trembling violently. Inside, he locked the doors immediately and checked the camera memory card carefully beneath dashboard light. The photographs remained intact. Senator Holloway, Judge Bennett, Elias Kane, all together inside sealed federal archives after midnight. Proof, real proof for the first time in years. Then Daniel noticed something else. One photograph captured part of the accountant's legal document, clearly enough to enlarge later. Several words remained readable despite the distance. Operation Glass Harbor, Phoenix Defense Systems, Witness Transfer Authorization. Daniel stared at the screen silently. Glass Harbor, the exact military contracting investigation that destroyed his judicial career 3 years earlier. Back then, Daniel accused senior officials of laundering defense money through fake reconstruction contracts overseas. Nobody believed him after key witnesses disappeared mysteriously. Now, one witness remained alive, barely. A knock suddenly hit the driver's side window. Daniel nearly jumped toward the steering wheel. A woman stood outside, beneath the rain, holding a dark umbrella. Late 30s, black wool coat, sharp brown eyes watching him carefully. Daniel lowered the window halfway. "You're Daniel Mercer," she said quietly. Not a question. "Yes." "My name is Naomi Reyes, investigative reporter with the Chicago Ledger." Daniel stiffened immediately. Reporters helped destroy him before. Naomi seemed to notice the distrust instantly. "I know what happened inside tonight," she continued calmly, "and I know somebody already erased the police reports downstairs." Daniel's heartbeat slowed dangerously. "How?" "I have sources inside internal affairs." She leaned closer beneath the umbrella while rain drummed heavily against the car roof. "The accountant downstairs was officially declared transferred safely into federal custody 30 minutes ago." Daniel stared at her. "But he never left that basement." "Exactly." Naomi glanced nervously toward the courthouse entrance. "Listen carefully. If Holloway knows you escaped with evidence, you're already dead." Daniel almost laughed bitterly. "Lady, my life ended 3 years ago." Naomi's expression hardened. "No, 3 years ago they isolated you. Tonight they became afraid of you again." Before Daniel answered, a black SUV slowly turned into the parking structure entrance. Same model from earlier, same dark-tinted windows. Naomi's face changed instantly. "We need to leave now," she whispered. Then the SUV headlights shut off completely. Naomi opened the passenger door quickly and slid into Daniel's car without waiting for permission. Her umbrella vanished onto the wet concrete floor beside her boots. "Drive," she ordered quietly. Daniel turned the ignition immediately. The old sedan coughed twice before finally roaring awake beneath the parking structure shadows. Behind them, the black SUV accelerated silently across slick pavement. Daniel slammed the transmission into reverse. Tires screeched violently. The sedan shot backward between concrete support pillars while headlights exploded behind them. Kane's SUV clipped the rear bumper hard enough to shake the entire vehicle. "Left," Naomi shouted. Daniel yanked the wheel sharply. The sedan barely squeezed through an exit ramp as security gates lowered automatically behind them. Metal crashed against the SUV's hood, slowing pursuit temporarily. Rain flooded Chicago streets beneath freezing wind rolling off Lake Michigan. Daniel sped through downtown traffic while Naomi pulled a small recorder from her coat pocket. "You carried a camera tonight because you expected something," she said. Daniel kept his eyes forward. "I expected corruption, not attempted murder." Naomi studied him carefully beneath passing streetlights. "You still think like a judge." Daniel laughed bitterly. "No, judges believe systems protect truth eventually." The SUV reappeared suddenly behind them. Fast, much faster now. Daniel cursed softly. "That thing's government modified." Naomi checked the side mirror calmly. "They're herding us somewhere isolated." Comforting observation. Daniel cut sharply through Lower Wacker Drive beneath downtown Chicago. Concrete tunnels swallowed the storm outside, while yellow sodium lights flickered across flooded pavement. The SUV followed relentlessly. Then another vehicle appeared ahead. Dark pickup truck, blocking both lanes. Daniel's stomach tightened. Trap. Naomi suddenly grabbed the steering wheel. "Right there," she yelled. A narrow service tunnel opened beside maintenance barriers. Daniel swerved instantly. The sedan scraped concrete violently, while mirrors shattered against tunnel walls. Behind them, Kane's SUV collided with the pickup truck unexpectedly. Metal exploded across the tunnel entrance. Daniel accelerated deeper underground, while Naomi breathed heavily beside him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel glanced sideways. "You handled that too calmly for a newspaper reporter." Naomi looked forward silently. Then she answered, "I covered war zones before journalism." Daniel frowned. "Military? Army intelligence?" That explained everything. The sharp instincts, the controlled breathing, the way she watched exits constantly. Daniel drove another mile before emerging near the Chicago River Industrial District. Empty warehouses lined dark streets beside abandoned shipping docks. Naomi pointed toward a decaying brick building. My office is upstairs. Nobody follows me there twice. Daniel parked cautiously beneath broken streetlights. As they exited the sedan, Naomi finally asked the question haunting both of them. What exactly did you uncover 3 years ago that terrified men like Holloway this badly? Daniel looked toward the river silently. Then he answered, I found evidence connecting missing military contractors to dead American soldiers overseas. Lightning flashed across the water, and somewhere inside the warehouse above them, a phone started ringing. The ringing phone echoed through the abandoned warehouse like a warning nobody wanted answered. Naomi stopped climbing the metal staircase immediately and drew a compact pistol from inside her coat. Daniel stared. You carry that legally? Naomi continued upward carefully. I stopped caring about legal paperwork after Kabul. The second-floor office overlooked the dark Chicago River through cracked industrial windows. Old newspaper boxes filled corners beside dusty filing cabinets and glowing computer monitors. The phone kept ringing. Naomi finally answered using speaker mode. Reyes? Heavy breathing answered first, then a frightened male voice. They moved him. Naomi's expression hardened instantly. Who is this? You know exactly who. Daniel recognized the voice suddenly, the accountant from the courthouse basement. Alive, barely. They're taking me south, the accountant whispered desperately. Private airfield near Joliet, please hurry. A loud crash interrupted the call, men shouting, then gunfire. The line died immediately afterward. Silence swallowed the office. Daniel looked toward Naomi slowly. Can calls be traced here? Already traced, probably. She moved fast now, opening drawers and grabbing files, hard drives, passports, and military maps covered with handwritten notes. Daniel noticed one photograph pinned above her desk. Young Naomi beside American soldiers overseas. One soldier circled carefully in red ink. Elias Kane. Daniel stepped closer. You served with him? Naomi zipped a bag shut violently. No, I investigated him. Her voice darkened dangerously. Kane ran covert extraction teams during defense operations overseas. Witnesses vanished wherever his units appeared. Daniel felt cold, settle deeper inside his chest. So Glass Harbor involved military executions. Naomi nodded once. Soldiers discovered illegal weapons transfers through Phoenix defense systems. Kane eliminated everyone threatening exposure. Daniel sat heavily against the desk edge. Years ago, he suspected financial corruption only, not murder. Naomi handed him a folder thick with classified copies. I spent 18 months chasing this network, she admitted quietly. 3 journalists disappeared before publishing anything. Daniel opened the folder slowly. Photographs, military manifests, dead contractors, bank transfers linked directly to Senator Holloway's political foundations. Then Daniel found something else. A sealed federal memo carrying his own signature. His eyes widened. That's impossible. Naomi looked confused. What? Daniel held up the document with shaking hands. The signature authorizing military contract approvals looked identical to his own judicial authorization stamp. Perfectly identical. But Daniel never signed it. Someone forged federal approvals using his credentials years before his public disgrace. Suddenly, headlights swept across the warehouse windows below. Multiple vehicles. Naomi killed the office lights instantly. Voices echoed downstairs. Professional. Armed. Daniel moved carefully toward the broken window and looked down into the alley. Black SUVs surrounded the warehouse entrance completely. Then Elias Kane stepped from the lead vehicle, holding a bullhorn, calmly beneath the freezing rain. Judge Mercer, Kane called upward. Senator Holloway wants to offer you a final deal before people start dying tonight. Rain poured harder outside while Elias Kane stood motionless beneath warehouse floodlights. Armed men spread across the alley behind him with disciplined military precision. Daniel counted 6 immediately, probably more hidden nearby. Naomi crouched beside the darkened office window and checked her pistol magazine carefully. We can't win a firefight, she whispered. Daniel kept watching Kane below. He knows that. Kane raised the bullhorn again calmly. You have evidence Senator Holloway considers sensitive, he announced. Bring the files downstairs and everyone walks away breathing. Naomi almost laughed. Professional liar, she muttered. Daniel noticed something strange suddenly. Kane never looked nervous, not even slightly. Men facing unpredictable situations usually scanned rooftops, checked blind spots, adjusted posture constantly. Kane stood completely relaxed, because he already controlled the outcome somehow. Daniel's stomach tightened. "There's another team inside already," he whispered. Naomi's expression changed instantly. A floorboard creaked behind them. Both turned sharply. A shadow moved near the office doorway. Daniel grabbed a rusted lamp instinctively while Naomi aimed her pistol toward the darkness. Then an elderly man stepped forward slowly, with both hands raised. "Please don't shoot," he whispered. Grey beard, maintenance uniform, terrified eyes. Daniel recognized him from somewhere, the courthouse janitor. "You work federal maintenance," Daniel said cautiously. The old man nodded. "My name is Walter Green. I overheard everything downstairs tonight." Naomi kept the pistol raised. "How did you find us?" "Your reporter friend leaves lights visible from Riverwalk cameras every night." Naomi cursed softly beneath her breath. Walter stepped closer nervously. "They killed 2 archivists after moving the accountant from the courthouse," he whispered. "I saw Kane's men carrying bodies toward service elevators." Daniel felt rage twist painfully inside him. Witnesses, archivists, anyone exposed became disposable. Walter reached carefully into his jacket pocket. Naomi nearly fired. Instead, Walter revealed a small brass key attached to a faded military tag. "There's an underground freight tunnel beneath this warehouse," he explained quickly. "Old Prohibition routes connecting river docks to Union Station." Daniel exchanged a glance with Naomi. "Escape route?" "Maybe." Then Kane's voice thundered upward again. "Your time expires in 60 seconds. Walter moved toward a hidden steel panel behind stacked newspaper crates. "Hurry." Daniel grabbed the evidence folders and camera equipment rapidly while Naomi covered the doorway. Below them, footsteps entered the warehouse staircase already. Fast, disciplined. Kane's men. Walter unlocked the hidden panel with trembling hands. Cold underground air rushed upward, carrying river moisture and rust. Darkness stretched below through narrow concrete stairs. Naomi gestured downward immediately. "Move." Daniel started descending first. Then gunfire exploded through the office doorway. Wood splintered violently beside Walter's head. The old janitor collapsed instantly onto the dusty floor. Blood spread beneath his maintenance jacket. Naomi fired back twice while dragging Daniel deeper underground. Above them, Kane's calm voice echoed through the chaos. "Don't damage the files," he ordered coldly. "The senator still needs those signatures." Daniel stumbled downward through the hidden tunnel while gunfire echoed above the warehouse ceiling. Concrete dust drifted from old support beams with every shot fired overhead. Naomi slammed the steel panel shut behind them and locked it quickly using the brass key Walter dropped before collapsing. Silence followed. Temporary. Daniel leaned heavily against the damp tunnel wall, trying to steady his breathing. Walter's terrified face remained burned inside his memory already. Another innocent witness dead. Naomi checked the narrow staircase carefully before lowering her pistol. "We keep moving," she said quietly. Daniel stared upward toward the hidden door. "He helped us for less than 2 minutes. That's enough time to die around powerful people." Her voice carried painful familiarity, not cruelty. Experience. The underground tunnel stretched endlessly beneath Chicago's industrial district. Ancient brick walls sweated moisture beside rusted railroad tracks abandoned generations earlier. Daniel followed Naomi through darkness illuminated only by her small tactical flashlight. "You trusted Walter immediately," he said after several minutes. Naomi kept walking. "I trusted fear in his eyes. Real fear looks identical everywhere." Daniel considered that silently. Then he asked the question bothering him constantly. "How deep were you involved with Kane overseas?" Naomi slowed slightly. "My brother served under him in Afghanistan." Daniel waited. He discovered illegal weapons shipments crossing military checkpoints into private militia territory. Her flashlight trembled faintly. 3 weeks later, his convoy supposedly hit an improvised explosive device. Supposedly. Daniel understood instantly. "You think Kane ordered it?" "I know he did." They continued deeper underground while distant thunder rolled above the city streets. Eventually, the tunnel widened into an enormous freight chamber filled with abandoned train cars covered in graffiti and standing water. Naomi suddenly raised one fist sharply. "Stop!" Daniel froze immediately. Voices echoed ahead. Not Kane's men. Different, younger, nervous. A flashlight beam swept across the chamber, revealing 3 teenagers huddled beside burning trash barrels. Homeless kids. 2 boys and 1 girl wrapped in blankets against the cold. The youngest boy spotted Daniel first. "You cops?" he asked suspiciously. "No," the teenagers relaxed slightly. Naomi lowered her weapon carefully. "You live down here?" she asked. The girl nodded. "Safer than shelters lately?" Daniel frowned. "Why?" The oldest boy looked toward the tunnel entrance fearfully. "Men started taking people from shelters this month, mostly veterans, sometimes witnesses hiding from police." Daniel's blood ran cold. Witnesses, Kane's network expanded farther than expected. Then the youngest boy pointed toward Daniel's evidence folder. "You carrying government papers?" Daniel hesitated. "Why?" The kid swallowed nervously. "Because another man came through here yesterday carrying files exactly like those." Naomi stepped forward instantly. "What man?" The boy pointed deeper into the tunnels. "Older accountant guy, beaten up pretty bad." Daniel and Naomi exchanged stunned looks. The accountant escaped, or someone let him escape intentionally. Then the girl whispered something barely audible. "He said if anyone found him, tell them Glass Harbor was never about weapons." Daniel felt dread settle heavily inside his chest. Then what was it about? The girl looked directly into his eyes. "Human experiments." The freight chamber fell completely silent after the girl spoke those words. Even the burning trash barrels seemed quieter suddenly beneath the dripping tunnel ceilings. Daniel stared at her carefully. "What kind of experiments?" he asked. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances. The oldest boy finally answered. The accountant kept repeating numbers and military hospital names, said soldiers disappeared after special treatment programs overseas. Naomi's face darkened instantly. "Kane ran medical extraction logistics during overseas deployments," she whispered. Daniel looked toward her sharply. "You never mentioned medical programs." "Because nobody survived long enough to testify officially." The youngest boy stepped closer beside the barrel fire. He said some soldiers came home different, violent, confused, sick all the time. Daniel felt nausea rise slowly inside his stomach, human testing hidden beneath military contracts. That explained the missing witnesses. Dead contractors, disappearing soldiers. Glass Harbor covered something far darker than corruption. Naomi knelt beside the teenagers carefully. "Which direction did the accountant go?" The girl pointed deeper underground, toward the river tunnels near Navy Pier. Daniel frowned immediately. "There's nothing operational near Navy Pier except abandoned Coast Guard storage." Naomi suddenly stiffened. "No," she said quietly, "not abandoned." Daniel recognized the fear in her eyes. "Kane's using military property inside the city." Naomi nodded once. "Temporary black sites, unregistered holding facilities." Thunder rolled above them again, while distant train vibrations shook dust from tunnel beams overhead. Daniel opened the evidence folder carefully beside the firelight. He searched through manifests and procurement records until one location repeated several times. Lakeview Medical Research Annex, closed officially 11 years earlier, but recent shipment dates appeared beside the facility name. Naomi leaned closer. Lakeview Annex sits directly beneath old Coast Guard storage tunnels. Daniel looked up slowly. Navy Pier. The accountant had been trying to reach the facility, or escape it. Suddenly footsteps echoed somewhere far behind them. Multiple people, moving quickly underground. Naomi extinguished the barrel fire instantly with a nearby bucket of filthy water. Darkness swallowed the chamber except for distant flashlight beams approaching through tunnel curves. The teenagers panicked immediately. "They found us," the youngest boy whispered. Daniel listened carefully. Professional movement again, not police, Kane's teams. Naomi motioned everyone toward an overturned freight car beside the tracks. "Quiet," she breathed. The approaching flashlights grew brighter. Voices echoed closer. Then Daniel heard something impossible. Judge Bennett's voice. "I don't care if Mercer survives anymore," Bennett snapped angrily underground. "Just recover those research files before federal auditors arrive tomorrow." Another man answered nervously, "Sir, Kane believes Mercer already knows about Project Lazarus." Project Lazarus. Daniel felt cold terror grip his chest. Bennett stopped walking, then he said the words quietly. "If Mercer discovers what happened to the soldiers in Phoenix, this country burns." Daniel pressed himself against the overturned freight car while Judge Bennett's group moved closer through the darkness. Dirty tunnel water dripped steadily beside rusted train wheels. The homeless teenagers trembled silently nearby. Naomi gripped her pistol with controlled breathing, but Daniel noticed something unusual. Fear. Real fear. Project Lazarus terrified even someone hardened by war reporting. Flashlight beams swept across tunnel walls only 20 feet away now. Judge Bennett sounded exhausted underground. "We should have buried Lazarus permanently after Phoenix," he muttered. Another man answered quietly. The senator believed military applications justified continuing trials domestically. Daniel felt his stomach tighten violently. Domestic trials, American citizens. Bennett stopped walking near the freight chamber entrance. "If those research files reach Washington, every person connected burns publicly," he warned. "Politicians, defense contractors, Pentagon officials." Then Kane's cold voice echoed from farther back. "Mercer won't reach Washington." The chamber fell silent immediately. Even Bennett sounded uneasy around Kane. Daniel carefully peered through broken freight car panels. Kane emerged from the tunnel shadows wearing black tactical gear beneath his rain-soaked coat. His expression remained calm and unreadable, predatory, controlled. "Search everything," Kane ordered. Flashlights spread outward across the chamber. Naomi leaned toward Daniel's ear carefully. "There's another exit behind this freight car," she whispered. "Maintenance ladders leading toward river drainage canals." Daniel nodded slightly. The youngest homeless boy suddenly coughed involuntarily beside the tracks. Every flashlight snapped toward the sound instantly. "There!" someone shouted. Gunfire exploded across the chamber. Naomi fired back immediately while Daniel grabbed the teenagers toward the rear ladder tunnel. Bullets shattered concrete overhead, spraying dust and rust everywhere. Kane advanced through the gunfire without hesitation. Steady, terrifyingly steady. Daniel shoved the teenagers upward onto the iron ladder first, while Naomi covered behind overturned steel crates. Then Bennett screamed suddenly. Everyone froze. A stray bullet struck his leg. The corrupt judge collapsed beside flooded tracks, clutching his bleeding thigh. Kane barely looked at him. "Leave him," Kane ordered coldly. Bennett stared upward in disbelief. "You can't abandon me." Kane finally stopped walking. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Kane spoke quietly enough that only nearby people heard clearly. "You should have signed the silence agreement years ago, Harold." Daniel watched realization flood Bennett's terrified face. Kane intended to eliminate everyone connected eventually, partners included. Suddenly Bennett pointed frantically toward Daniel's hiding place. "Mercer knows about the Phoenix survivors," he shouted desperately. "He'll expose everything." Kane's eyes lifted slowly toward the maintenance ladder, straight toward Daniel. Then Kane smiled faintly. "You still don't understand, Judge Mercer," he called upward calmly. "The survivors were never the experiment." Rainwater rushed through narrow drainage canals, while Daniel climbed the maintenance ladder beside terrified teenagers and Naomi Reyes. Gunfire echoed behind them through underground chambers beneath Chicago. Kane's final words repeated endlessly inside Daniel's mind. The survivors were never the experiment. Then who was? Naomi sealed the ladder hatch above them once everyone reached the surface tunnel. Cold wind swept through concrete waterways leading toward Lake Michigan. The homeless teenagers huddled together, violently shaking. Daniel removed his jacket and wrapped it around the youngest boy without speaking. Naomi noticed. "You still protect people automatically," she said quietly. Daniel stared toward distant city lights, reflecting across storm water. "I failed to protect people before." Naomi looked at him carefully. "No. You trusted institutions designed to fail them." Before Daniel answered, footsteps echoed again from farther inside the drainage canal. Fast, but uneven. Not Kane. A figure stumbled around the tunnel corner, clutching one bleeding arm desperately. The accountant, alive, barely conscious. Daniel rushed forward immediately and caught him before he collapsed, face first, into freezing water. The older man's skin looked pale grey beneath tunnel lighting. "They injected them," he whispered deliriously. "God forgive us." Naomi checked his wounds quickly. "Gunshot passed through clean. He's losing blood, though." Daniel supported the accountant against the tunnel wall. "What experiments?" he demanded softly. "Tell us now." The accountant's frightened eyes focused weakly. "Project Lazarus wasn't medical research," he whispered. "It studied obedience." Daniel frowned. "Obedience?" "Neurological conditioning, chemical influence, trauma manipulation inside combat units." Naomi's face hardened with recognition. "Behavioral warfare." The accountant nodded weakly. "They wanted soldiers who followed orders without emotional resistance, men incapable of guilt." Daniel felt sick instantly, human conscience erased deliberately. The accountant grabbed Daniel's sleeve suddenly. "The real subjects weren't soldiers," he whispered urgently. "They tested civilians first." The tunnel seemed colder immediately. "Who civilians?" Daniel asked. The accountant swallowed painfully. "Homeless populations, shelter residents, forgotten people nobody tracked officially." The teenagers nearby stared in silent horror. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "They disappeared people because nobody investigated missing homeless citizens seriously enough." The accountant nodded again. "Kane supervised transport operations personally." Then another terrifying realization struck Daniel. "Phoenix," he whispered. "My original investigation uncovered veterans returning unstable from overseas." "Yes," the accountant gasped, "because combat trauma amplified conditioning effects." But domestic trials began years earlier inside Chicago. Daniel's heartbeat slowed dangerously. "Who authorized civilian testing?" The accountant looked directly into his eyes. "Your former mentor." Daniel froze completely. Judge Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who taught him constitutional law, the respected federal ethics commissioner who defended him publicly before his disgrace. Impossible. Then tunnel lights suddenly illuminated behind them. Kane's voice echoed calmly through the drainage canal. "Unfortunately," he said coldly, "Judge Whitmore preferred witnesses stay buried permanently." Tunnel lights reflected across rushing canal water, while Elias Kane approached slowly through the underground darkness. Armed men followed behind him, carrying suppressed rifles and tactical flashlights. The accountant began shaking violently beside Daniel. "He kills everyone eventually," the old man whispered. Kane stopped 20 feet away beneath flickering maintenance lights. Rainwater dripped steadily from his black coat onto concrete. Calm, completely calm. Judge Whitmore's name still echoed painfully inside Daniel's mind. His mentor. The woman who once taught him justice mattered beyond politics. Daniel stepped protectively in front of the teenagers instinctively. Kane noticed immediately. "You always did confuse morality with usefulness," Kane said quietly. Naomi kept her pistol raised steadily. "You experimented on homeless civilians," she snapped. Kane barely reacted. "The military experiments failed because soldiers retained emotional conditioning from civilian life." The words sounded clinical, detached, like discussing defective machinery. Daniel felt anger rise dangerously. They were human beings. Kane finally looked directly into his eyes. "Human beings destroy countries faster than weapons ever could." The accountant suddenly coughed blood beside the wall. Kane glanced toward him dismissively. "Martin should have accepted retirement quietly years ago." Daniel frowned. "Retirement?" The accountant laughed weakly through pain. "That's what they call witness elimination internally." Naomi whispered toward Daniel carefully. "He's stalling us." Daniel understood instantly. Kane never wasted words accidentally. More teams were positioning somewhere. Then Kane surprised everyone. He lowered his weapon completely. "You deserve truth before this ends," he said calmly. Daniel stared suspiciously. "Why?" "Because Whitmore specifically requested you understand why your career died." Daniel's chest tightened. Kane continued slowly. 3 years ago, you uncovered unauthorized defense transfers tied indirectly to Lazarus operations. Whitmore realized exposing the program would trigger congressional investigations. Naomi interrupted sharply. So they framed Daniel publicly instead. Kane nodded once. Destroying one judge protected national stability. Daniel almost laughed from disbelief. National stability? Kane stepped closer through shallow canal water. You still think countries survive through morality? They survive through controlled sacrifice. The homeless girl suddenly shouted angrily, "You murdered people because they were poor." For the first time, Kane's expression changed slightly. Not guilt, annoyance. "No," he replied coldly. "We used population society already abandoned." The words hit Daniel harder than gunfire, because Kane believed them completely. Then a new voice echoed from farther behind Kane's men. Female, older, familiar. And that belief is exactly why this operation failed. Everyone turned. Judge Eleanor Whitmore stepped from the tunnel shadows wearing a long grey coat beside two federal marshals. Daniel's heartbeat stopped. Whitmore looked older now, tired, haunted, but alive, and standing directly beside the people who destroyed him. The drainage tunnel fell silent except for rushing water beneath rusted maintenance grates. Judge Eleanor Whitmore stood motionless beside two armed federal marshals while Elias Kane watched her carefully. Daniel stared at the woman who once shaped his entire legal career. Betrayal burned hotter than anger now. Whitmore removed leather gloves slowly before speaking again. "You should have left Chicago after your disgrace, Daniel." Her voice sounded exhausted, not cruel. That somehow hurt worse. Daniel stepped forward through shallow canal water. "You framed me to protect human experiments." Whitmore closed her eyes briefly. "I protected national security during a catastrophic intelligence crisis." Naomi laughed bitterly. "That's how monsters justify everything eventually." One federal marshal shifted uneasily beside Whitmore. Daniel noticed immediately. Not everyone present trusted this operation anymore. Whitmore looked toward the homeless teenagers huddled near the wall. "You think I enjoyed sacrificing vulnerable people?" she asked quietly. "You think I sleep peacefully after approving Lazarus trials?" Daniel answered instantly. "You approved them anyway." The tunnel lights buzzed overhead. Whitmore's face hardened suddenly. "You were always idealistic," she replied. "That's why they chose you originally." Daniel frowned. "Chose me for what?" Kane smiled faintly beside the canal. "Future recruitment." Naomi's eyes widened. Whitmore nodded slowly. "Your psychological evaluations showed unusually high moral resilience combined with legal intelligence. Lazarus researchers believed ethical individuals produced stronger conditioning resistance." Daniel felt physically ill. "They studied me. Since law school." Everything crashed together horribly inside his mind. The scholarships, the elite internships, the rapid judicial promotions. Every opportunity guiding him carefully toward federal authority. Whitmore stepped closer now. "When you uncovered corruption naturally, researchers became fascinated," she admitted softly. "Most people compromise eventually. You refused repeatedly." Naomi whispered in disbelief. "They built his career as part of the experiment." Kane nodded. "Lazarus sought methods controlling conscience itself. Daniel Mercer represented the failure case." Daniel clenched his fists violently. "You ruined innocent lives studying morality like laboratory rats." Whitmore's composure finally cracked slightly. "Innocent lives?" she whispered painfully. "Daniel, foreign governments already developed similar conditioning programs years earlier. Millions could die if America fell behind psychologically." The accountant suddenly spoke weakly from beside the tunnel wall. "She's lying." Everyone turned. Martin struggled painfully upright despite blood soaking his sleeve. "There never were foreign programs," he gasped. "Phoenix executives invented external threats to secure military funding." Whitmore's expression changed instantly. Fear, real fear. Kane slowly looked toward her. "You told me those reports were verified," he said quietly. Whitmore remained silent. The truth settled across the tunnel heavily. Project Lazarus never protected America. It protected careers, power, money, and suddenly Kane understood he had murdered countless people for a fabricated threat. The canal lights flickered again. Then Kane raised his pistol slowly toward Whitmore. Cold tunnel air seemed frozen in place after Martin exposed the truth. Water rushed through the drainage canal while everyone stared toward Judge Whitmore silently. Elias Kane kept his pistol aimed directly at her chest. Whitmore looked suddenly smaller beneath the flickering maintenance lights. Not powerful anymore, just tired. "You fabricated foreign intelligence reports?" Kane asked quietly. Whitmore swallowed hard. The Pentagon needed funding continuity after Afghanistan collapsed politically. "That isn't an answer." Her voice cracked slightly now. Phoenix Defense Systems promised breakthroughs in neurological conditioning. Congress would never approve civilian testing without national security justification. Naomi stepped forward angrily. "So you invented enemies to justify experiments on homeless Americans?" Whitmore looked toward the teenager scenes beside the wall. Pain crossed her face briefly. "I told myself temporary sacrifice prevented larger wars later." Martin laughed weakly despite his injuries. "No," he whispered. "You protected investors." Daniel watched Kane carefully. Something dangerous shifted behind the contractor's calm expression now. Not morality, betrayal. "You recruited me using falsified intelligence," Kane said softly. Whitmore tried regaining control. "Kane, listen carefully. Emotional reactions solve nothing tonight." The irony almost made Daniel sick. Emotional reactions from the woman who spent years funding conscience manipulation. One federal marshal lowered his weapon slowly. "You lied to federal command structures," he muttered toward Whitmore. The second marshal exchanged uncertain glances beside him. Power structures were fracturing now, Whitmore noticed immediately. "Stand down," she ordered sharply. Neither marshal moved. Then Kane surprised everyone again. He lowered his pistol completely. "You know what Lazarus actually proved?" he asked Whitmore quietly. Nobody answered. Kane looked toward Daniel instead. "You cannot erase conscience permanently." Daniel frowned. Kane's voice remained calm, but something haunted lived beneath it now. The soldiers developed guilt eventually. Nightmares, suicides, psychological collapse. Naomi stared at him carefully. "You're describing yourself." For several seconds Kane said nothing. Then he nodded once. "I remember every face." The tunnel felt unbearably heavy suddenly. Years of violence finally surfacing inside a man trained never to hesitate. Whitmore stepped backward slowly. "You don't understand what exposure causes," she warned. "Governments collapse when citizens lose faith completely." Daniel answered quietly, "No, governments collapse when truth becomes illegal." Sirens echoed faintly somewhere above ground. Closer now. Federal response teams, probably. Whitmore heard them too. Panic flashed briefly across her face, then she reached suddenly inside her coat. One marshal shouted instantly, "Gun!" Everything exploded into motion. Kane fired first. One deafening shot cracked through the drainage tunnel. Whitmore staggered backward against the concrete wall. A hard drive slipped from her coat pocket into rushing canal water. Then she collapsed silently beside the flood channel. Blood spread slowly beneath her grey coat. Daniel stared in shock. Kane lowered the pistol again with trembling hands. "She was reaching for the Lazarus archive," he said quietly. But nobody knew anymore whether he had saved them or silenced her forever. Federal sirens grew louder above the city, while water carried Whitmore's fallen hard drive deeper through the drainage canal. Everyone stood frozen beside the body. Daniel stared toward Kane carefully. "You executed her." Kane's face looked strangely empty now. "No," he replied quietly. "I stopped her from erasing evidence permanently." Naomi moved instantly toward the canal. "The hard drive!" she shouted. Daniel lunged beside her as freezing water rushed through narrow concrete channels toward underground river gates. The black drive bounced against debris before catching briefly near rusted drainage bars. Daniel reached dangerously into the current. His fingertips barely touched the device. Then another surge swept through the tunnel. The hard drive disappeared deeper underground. "Damn it," Naomi hissed. One federal marshal suddenly raised his weapon toward Kane. "Drop the pistol immediately." Kane complied without resistance, no hesitation, no attempt escaping. That unsettled Daniel more than violence would have. Martin coughed painfully beside the wall. The archive isn't only on the drive, he whispered weakly. Everyone turned toward him. Martin forced himself upright while clutching his bleeding shoulder. Whitmore never trusted digital storage completely. She kept physical records inside Lakeview Annex. Naomi frowned. The underground research facility near Navy Pier? Martin nodded. Original subject files, payment ledgers, neurological trial reports. Daniel understood immediately. Enough evidence to destroy every person connected permanently. Then Kane spoke again. Those records won't matter if Senator Holloway escapes tonight. Daniel looked sharply toward him. Kane, why help us now? For the first time, the former contractor seemed genuinely exhausted. Because Whitmore lied about everything. His voice remained low. She said Lazarus protected America from hostile foreign programs. But there were never external threats. Naomi crossed her arms suspiciously. So guilt suddenly turned you honorable? Kane met her stare calmly. No. Guilt made me tired. The tunnel lights flickered again, while sirens echoed much closer overhead. One marshal approached Daniel carefully. Judge Mercer, federal response teams arrive within minutes. Once they secure this scene, evidence disappears again, unless someone reaches Lakeview first. Daniel understood perfectly. Official systems still contained too many compromised people. Holloway would bury everything by sunrise. Naomi grabbed her coat immediately. Then we move now. Martin caught Daniel's sleeve weakly before he turned away. There's something else inside Lakeview, the accountant whispered. Daniel leaned closer. Martin's frightened eyes filled with shame. The first successful Lazarus subject survived. Daniel frowned. Successful how? Martin swallowed painfully. He never regained independent thought afterward. Cold dread settled across Daniel's chest. Naomi noticed instantly. Who was the subject? She asked. Martin looked directly at Kane. Then he answered softly, Kane's younger brother. The drainage tunnel seemed colder after Martin revealed the truth about Kane's brother. Even the federal marshals exchanged disturbed glances beneath the flickering lights. Kane stood completely motionless. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Kane laughed once, short, empty. My brother died in Fallujah 15 years ago, he said quietly. Martin shook his head weakly. No. They told you he died. Daniel watched Kane carefully now. The contractor's disciplined posture began cracking almost invisibly. Tiny tremors moved through his hands despite years of military control. Martin continued painfully. Your brother survived catastrophic injuries during field operations. Lazarus researchers transferred him into the first neurological conditioning trials. Naomi's face darkened. They experimented on Kane's own family without telling him. Martin nodded. Whitmore believed emotional separation improved operational loyalty. Kane lowered his eyes toward the canal water silently. Daniel suddenly understood everything. Why Kane obeyed endlessly. Why he justified horrors through national security language. The system consumed him too, just differently. One marshal stepped cautiously toward Kane. If this is true, Federal Command needs immediate debriefing. Kane looked up slowly. No Federal Command structure remains clean anymore. Then he turned toward Daniel. Lakeview Annex sits beneath Pier 41 shipping storage. 3 underground levels, restricted military access. Naomi frowned suspiciously. You're helping us reach it? Kane nodded once. My brother deserves burial under his real name. Sirens echoed directly overhead now. Response teams arriving. Daniel made his decision quickly. We leave separately, he told the marshals. If federal agencies already compromised the courthouse tonight, nobody enters official custody safely. One marshal hesitated. Then, surprisingly, he handed Daniel a small encrypted radio. My daughter disappeared from a shelter 6 months ago, he admitted quietly. If Lazarus touched domestic populations, I want truth exposed too. Daniel accepted the radio silently. Ordinary people were finally choosing sides. They moved quickly afterward through secondary maintenance tunnels leading toward Navy Pier access routes. Rain hammered Chicago above, while cold lake wind poured through cracked storm gates. Naomi walked beside Kane cautiously. Why never search for your brother independently? She asked. Kane answered without emotion, because Lazarus conditioned me first. Daniel looked sharply toward him. Kane's eyes remained fixed ahead. I volunteered for combat enhancement evaluations before overseas deployment. They manipulated memory association and emotional response thresholds. The realization hit Naomi instantly. You became both weapon and experiment simultaneously. Kane gave a faint nod. Successful enough to continue operations. Human enough to regret them eventually. Ahead, enormous steel security doors emerged beneath abandoned shipping docks near the lakefront. Faded government lettering remained barely visible through rust. Lakeview Medical Research Annex. Then Daniel noticed fresh tire tracks leading underground. Someone arrived recently, and the heavy security doors were already open. Cold air poured from the open security doors beneath Navy Pier, while distant waves crashed against Chicago's frozen shoreline. Daniel stopped just outside the entrance, studying the darkness below carefully. Fresh tire tracks disappeared down the underground ramp. Someone reached Lakeview Annex before them. Naomi checked her pistol again, while Kane knelt beside a rusted security panel mounted near the doorway. The external cameras were disabled manually, he said quietly. Professional work. Daniel frowned. Holloway? Kane shook his head. No, different tradecraft. That answer unsettled everyone immediately. Another faction existed somewhere inside the operation. The group descended carefully into the underground facility. Emergency lights glowed dim red across concrete corridors lined with abandoned medical equipment and faded military warning signs. The place smelled like antiseptic and rust. Death lingered permanently here. Daniel noticed scratched numbers covering hallway walls. Patient designations, experiment codes, some written desperately by hand. Naomi slowed beside a shattered observation window overlooking an old treatment chamber. Leather restraint chairs remained bolted to the floor. Daniel looked away instantly. One homeless teenager whispered softly behind them. They did this under the city the whole time. Nobody answered, because the truth felt too monstrous for words now. Kane guided them deeper underground toward reinforced elevator doors marked Level 3 authorized access only. My brother's records would remain below, he said. Daniel studied him carefully. You really believe he survived all these years? Kane hesitated, then quietly answered. I stopped believing anything during my second deployment. The elevator still functioned somehow. Emergency generators hummed faintly beneath the facility. As the doors opened downward, Daniel noticed fresh blood smeared across the metal control panel. Recent. Very recent. Level 3 looked different from the floors above. Cleaner, operational, computer monitors glowed behind glass partitions, while refrigerated storage units lined sterile corridors. Someone maintained this section actively. Then Daniel heard voices ahead. A woman speaking urgently. Senator already evacuated primary archives. Remaining subjects transfer tonight. Naomi signaled everyone against the wall. Daniel carefully peered through the doorway window. Inside the laboratory stood Senator Holloway, beside several scientists wearing medical uniforms. Armed guards monitored restrained patients lying unconscious inside hospital beds. Daniel's stomach turned immediately. The patients looked homeless, young, forgotten. One restrained man suddenly opened terrified eyes toward the observation window, and Daniel recognized him instantly, the homeless veteran from outside the courthouse, the man who warned him the witnesses were moving. Then the veteran mouthed 3 silent words through the glass. They changed me. Daniel felt rage surge through his chest as the homeless veteran pressed trembling hands against the restraint straps. Fear filled the man's hollow eyes beneath harsh laboratory lights. They're still running experiments, Naomi whispered. Kane's expression darkened dangerously. Not experiments anymore, he replied quietly. Field conditioning. Inside the laboratory, Senator Holloway reviewed documents beside refrigerated storage units marked with military transport codes. Calm, untouched by guilt. Daniel noticed children's names listed among transfer manifests. His blood ran cold. The homeless teenagers behind him saw the lists too. The youngest boy looked suddenly sick. That's our shelter, he whispered. Those names are kids from West Halstead. Naomi clenched her jaw violently. Holloway expanded Lazarus into domestic population control. Kane nodded once. Behavioral obedience programs hidden beneath homelessness outreach funding. Daniel almost couldn't process the scale anymore. The laboratory doors suddenly opened. A nervous scientist approached Holloway carrying a medical tablet. "Senator, neurological instability continues increasing among long-term subjects," she warned. "Several patients regained emotional autonomy unexpectedly." Holloway barely looked up. "Dispose of unstable subjects before transfer." The words landed with horrifying casualness. Dispose. Human beings reduced to failed inventory. Then the homeless veteran inside the bed, restraint screamed suddenly. Raw. Animal. Painful. Every guard turned instantly toward him. The veteran slammed his head repeatedly against the bed frame while shouting fragmented phrases. "Mercer. Courthouse. Don't trust." A guard injected something into his neck violently. The veteran collapsed, shaking. Daniel stepped backward from the observation window, breathing hard. They destroyed his mind. Kane stared through the glass silently. Then he pointed toward a secured archive room beyond the main laboratory. "Primary Lazarus records stay inside there." Naomi frowned. "How do we reach them with armed guards everywhere?" Kane removed a black access card slowly from his coat. "Because Holloway still believes I work for him." Daniel looked sharply toward him. "You expect us to trust you now?" Kane met his eyes steadily. "No, but tonight trust became irrelevant." Before anyone answered, alarms suddenly flashed red throughout the facility. A computerized voice echoed overhead. "Federal tactical units approaching perimeter access." Holloway looked up immediately inside the laboratory. Panic crossed his face for the first time. "Who leaked this facility?" he demanded. One scientist answered nervously. "Sir, encrypted files transmitted externally 12 minutes ago." Naomi stiffened beside Daniel. "I never sent anything." Then Daniel realized something terrifying. Someone else inside Lazarus wanted exposure too. Suddenly, every monitor inside the laboratory flickered. A distorted male face appeared across all screens simultaneously. Pale, emotionless, watching. Then the man spoke calmly through facility speakers. "Good evening, Senator Holloway." Kane froze instantly beside Daniel because he recognized the voice. His brother was alive. Every monitor inside Lakeview Annex displayed the same pale face beneath flickering emergency lights. Holloway stepped backward slowly while scientists stared upward in confusion. Kane looked physically shaken for the first time all night. "My God," he whispered. The man on the screens appeared early 40s. Hollow cheeks, emotionless eyes, surgical scars visible near his temples beneath close-cropped hair. Yet the resemblance remained unmistakable. Kane's brother. Alive. The facility speakers crackled softly. "Hello, Elias." Kane moved toward the laboratory doors automatically. "You're dead," he said quietly. The face on the monitors tilted slightly. That was the original intention. Daniel watched Kane carefully. Years of controlled violence suddenly collided with buried grief inside the former operative. Inside the laboratory, Holloway regained composure quickly. "Terminate all network access immediately," he ordered guards. Nobody moved. Every computer system suddenly locked simultaneously. Laboratory doors sealed automatically with heavy magnetic thuds. The voice returned through overhead speakers. "You taught me obedience very effectively, Senator." Holloway's confidence cracked instantly. Kane stepped toward the observation window slowly. "What did they do to you?" A long silence followed, then the answer came calmly. "They erased fear first, then memory, then identity." Daniel felt chills race across his skin. The man continued, "But emotions return eventually, especially pain." Suddenly, every monitor switched feeds. Hidden camera footage flooded the screens, human experiments, children restrained inside treatment rooms, homeless veterans screaming during neurological injections. Signed approvals carrying Holloway's authorization, Whitmore's signatures, military transport records. Everything. Naomi stared in shock. "He's broadcasting the archive publicly." Outside above them, distant helicopter blades thundered across the Chicago skyline. News agencies, federal tactical teams. The truth was escaping permanently now. Holloway pulled a pistol from his coat suddenly. "You stupid animal," he screamed toward the monitors. "You were property." Before anyone reacted, Kane moved, fast. The former operative slammed Holloway against laboratory glass hard enough to crack it instantly. Guards raised weapons everywhere, while terrified scientists backed away from the confrontation. Kane pressed the senator violently against the window. "My brother had a name," he growled. The laboratory speakers interrupted sharply. "Elias." Kane froze. The monitor image softened slightly. "Don't become what they designed." Silence swallowed the room. Even Holloway stopped struggling. Then the sealed archive room doors unlocked automatically beside Daniel and Naomi. Inside waited shelves filled with physical Lazarus records, enough evidence to destroy governments. And at the center of the archive room stood a single hospital bed, connected to machines, occupied. The man inside the bed slowly opened his eyes toward Daniel, then he whispered weakly, "Judge Mercer, they started studying you when you were 8 years old." The underground archive room felt impossibly quiet after everything that happened above. Sirens echoed faintly through concrete walls while helicopters thundered across the Chicago lakefront. Daniel stepped slowly toward the hospital bed at the center of the archive chamber. Machines beeped steadily beside pale fluorescent lights. The elderly man lying beneath blankets looked barely alive, thin, fragile. Yet his eyes remained terrifyingly clear. "You know me," Daniel whispered. The old man nodded weakly. "I helped design Lazarus behavioral studies before Whitmore expanded them." Naomi entered behind Daniel carrying stacks of physical files against her chest. Every folder contained destroyed lives. Every page proved systematic crimes against forgotten Americans. Kane remained outside holding Holloway at gunpoint while federal tactical teams stormed the upper facility levels. But inside the archive room, truth finally waited uncovered. The old researcher looked toward Daniel sadly. "You were never selected randomly." Daniel felt cold settle deep inside his chest. "What does that mean?" The man struggled painfully for breath. "When you were 8 years old, your mother entered a federal legal assistance program after your father's death." Daniel froze. Nobody mentioned his father for years. The researcher continued quietly. "Government psychologists monitored gifted children showing unusually strong ethical reasoning patterns, children capable of resisting manipulation." Daniel stared silently. "My entire life was surveillance." "No," the researcher whispered painfully. "Your entire life was observation. There's a difference." Naomi interrupted sharply. "You studied conscience like laboratory science." The old man nodded weakly. "Lazarus failed because morality cannot be erased permanently. Trauma hides it temporarily. Fear suppresses it. Chemicals distort it. But conscience always returns eventually." Daniel suddenly understood why Kane finally turned against Holloway. Why the veterans collapsed psychologically. Why Whitmore looked haunted before dying. Human beings were never designed to live without guilt. Outside the archive room, gunfire echoed briefly. Then silence. Kane entered slowly afterward beside armed federal agents. Senator Holloway walked between them in handcuffs, finally looking old instead of powerful. Broken. Holloway stared toward Daniel bitterly. "You think exposing this changes America?" he asked quietly. Daniel looked around the archive room. The frightened teenagers, the rescued homeless veterans, the evidence, the survivors. Then he answered calmly, "No, but hiding it destroyed America already." Federal agents escorted Holloway away while emergency medics flooded the facility. Naomi handed encrypted evidence drives toward arriving investigators she trusted personally. Above ground, dawn slowly rose across Chicago. Snow began falling lightly over Lake Michigan. Hours later, Daniel stood outside the museum steps near the courthouse where everything began. News broadcasts played everywhere now. Project Lazarus exposed, senator arrested, secret human testing investigation launched. The city looked different somehow, not cleaner, not safer, just honest for the first time. Naomi approached carrying 2 coffees beneath the cold morning sky. "You know they'll offer your judgeship back eventually," she said. Daniel accepted the coffee slowly. "Maybe. You deserve it." Daniel watched pedestrians crossing snowy streets while homeless veterans waited near warming shelters nearby. "No," he replied quietly. "What those people deserve matters more now." Across the street, the young homeless girl from the tunnels walked beside federal social workers toward temporary housing transport. She looked back toward Daniel briefly, then smiled, small, hopeful, real. Daniel smiled back. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt impossible. The investigation would continue for years afterward. Powerful names would fall slowly. Some would escape consequences completely. That always happened. But survivors finally had voices, and America finally saw the people it abandoned underground. Daniel looked toward the rising winter sunlight reflecting across Chicago skyscrapers, then quietly walked forward into the crowd, not as a ruined judge, not as an experiment, just a man who finally understood truth mattered most when protecting forgotten people. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.